A university in Tennessee is set to become the first historically black institution to ice an NCAA Division I hockey team. Tennessee State University, which counts among its alum TV icon Oprah Winfrey and Olympian Wilma Rudolph, has more than a dozen players committed to the program, including a number of Canadians. I'm Dave Breakenridge, and this is 10-3. National Post contributor Allen Abel joins me to discuss the challenges TSU faces in getting the program off the ground, what's significant about this push to grow hockey at the collegiate level, and the former Maple Leafs coaching staffer leading the charge. Don't forget you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. I'd love it if you could leave us a rating, a review, and tell your friends about the show. So, Alan, you recently wrote a piece for the National Post about a pretty unique program starting up in collegiate hockey in the United States. And I guess first we can talk about the school where this is happening. Tell me about Tennessee State University. Where is it? What's it known for? And what's the student makeup there?
Tennessee State is one of about 105 or 107 what are called HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. Some of them founded before the Civil War when clearly African Americans could not attend any institution of higher learning or institutions of lower learning in the South, of course. Some of them founded after the Civil War. Some of them are as small as 20 to 40 students. Some of them are giants. I don't think that many of them are household names in Canada. There are famous schools like Grambling, like Morgan State, like Bethune-Cookman, like Howard University in Washington that Kamala Harris attended. When she left Westmount High in Montreal, quite prominent in the African-American community. They have all-black sororities, all-black fraternities. They're famous for their marching bands. They're famous for their cheering squads. They're famous for football. They're famous for basketball. They are not famous for hockey. There's never been a hockey team at an HBCU. So this proposal, when it first came up about 4 years ago, created some noise. And now at the moment, it looks like it is scheduled to happen this fall. A Division I, that's the highest level of intercollegiate sports in the U.S., men's hockey team at an historically black college. Were about 8,500 students. Enrollment has crashed. They're under deep financial stress, what's called official financial exigency in the state of Tennessee, and they're on a hill overlooking Nashville. But they are very separate from Music City by necessity. The school was founded about 115 years ago at a time when blacks could not attend any other college in the state of Tennessee. So it is one of two officially state-funded universities. The other is U of T, the Volunteers, the Vols, the famous orange uniform football team down in Knoxville. This is TSU, Tennessee State, and they are the Tigers.
So as you mentioned, the school is launching a Division I hockey program this fall, and it was first announced a couple of years ago, and it took a lot of people by surprise when they announced they were launching a collegiate hockey program. Why did the college want to make that move, and what was so surprising about it at the time? Just that it had never been done, or that they felt that there was an opportunity there that they could seize?
Well, if you step back a step and talk about Jerome McGinley, talk about Grant Fuhr, talk about Tony McKegney going back 40 years, talk about Mike Marson or Anson Carter, there obviously have been some highly successful players of African descent in the National Hockey League. So that being said, it still is, I guess, a bit of an outlier to be of that descent and play ice hockey. Certainly in the U.S. collegiate ranks, there are very, very few. And the NHL draft was held in Nashville in 2023. And there was kind of a confluence in which a woman who at the time was the president of TSU, I guess with the prodding of the Nashville Predators, with the prodding of the NHL, they've already had what they call a BIPOC hockey coaching initiative. There's clearly always been an interest in growing hockey in minority communities. And this woman, President Glover, came out with how much forethought, I don't know, how much encouragement from her board of directors, I don't know. but with great audacity, I do know, and said, we'd like to be the first HBCU to have a hockey team. And that was greeted with ebullient excitement by Commissioner for Life Bettman, by the NHL's community relations people. The Predators jumped in, and they had a press conference coming up 2 years ago, June of 23, and said, we're going to do this. And what was left unsaid is who's going to pay for it, who's going to play for it, and who's going to come watch. So it was maybe a hasty jump into the pool, but once you're in the pool, you've got to swim. And the story I did for the Post last week was how they're trying to swim against some very strong currents, be they financial, be they just the complexion or the composition of hockey today, and against mostly indifference, I would think, on the campus. I went to a TSU basketball game. They are Division I in basketball. They play in the Ohio Valley Conference, kind of a mid-level Division I conference, and there couldn't have been 150 people who paid to get into the game and 0 students on a Saturday afternoon. They don't have an arena. They don't have a cube of ice to skate on. They're probably not going to be able to play at the Bridgestone Arena where the Predators play. They've been offered, I think, a Predators practice facility out in the Nashville suburbs somewhere. So whatever splash they're going to make, it's going to require a lot of thrashing around in the water. They've got players signed or committed verbally. I don't think they've signed official contracts yet. And they're trying to compete in an extremely expensive and extremely competitive sport at the highest level.
Yeah. Who is spearheading this initiative for Tennessee State, and what is the cost involved? As you said, the university itself is struggling financially. I can't imagine there's a lot of money for a new athletics program.
The CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of the Nashville Predators, Bill Wickett, told me he estimated it will cost them about $2 million to put blades on the ice this fall. That is completely separate from the idea of building an arena, having a place to actually play. College hockey in general doesn't bring in more than a few thousand spectators. My daughter is a sophomore at Michigan State, which just clinched the Big Ten championship, and they packed their arena at about 7,000 seats. But a friend of hers is playing at Brown University in the Ivy League, also Division I, in Rhode Island, and we went to a few games there over New Year's, and I don't think they drew 60 people. So this is not a place where gate receipts are going to be enough money. The parents of the Canadian players whom I spoke with said they believed that their boys were getting a free ride, full tuition, full room and board, travel, etc., equipment, ice time, things that hockey players pay for. And I've been told since then that it's not really a full ride in the way that a football player going to Ohio State gets, or like Zach Edey, the basketball player from Canada, got playing at Purdue the past 4 years. So how much this is going to cost the university, how much it's going to cost the parents, I don't think that's decided yet. But hockey's a pretty expensive game, and they are tens of millions of dollars in a budget hole. The Republican-controlled Tennessee state legislature has alleged that this hole was dug through mismanagement, misappropriation. And I didn't sense great enthusiasm on the part of the Tennessee GOP to throw more money at them. They had appropriated them more than $100 million for capital improvements on the aging campus. And as of a couple of weeks ago, the school was asking the state for permission to use those capital improvement funds just for general operations, just to pay the staff to not have to lay off any more staff and faculty. So the school is not thriving economically. It is, like most HBCUs, no longer 100% African American. That was a different kind of exigency imposed by segregation. But it is, I think, about 86% black at this point for undergrads. It's 30% white for graduate students. So it's not exclusionary. There are HBCUs with even higher percentages of white students and white athletes. I read a story recently. The headline was, "Why is the best quarterback at an HBCU white?" And this was at a school in Florida. So it's not, this is not meant to be the Harlem Globetrotters. It's not meant to be a trick or any kind of gimmick, but it also faces enormous economic headwinds.
Who is handling this initiative or to build up this program, and what are they doing to scout and recruit?
The president who made this announcement, President Glover, almost immediately retired, was given a $1.7 million US goodbye package, which has since been revoked because the school can't afford it anyway. And the legislature has enough problems on its hand funding the college, let alone people who no longer work at the college. So I guess she threw this first stone in the water. And the NHL, of course, expressed great excitement because they're not about to say this is not a good idea. At its ultimate, speaking, I think I used the phrase decades or centuries hence, the idea that hockey becomes, if not dominated, at least well populated by superb black athletes, as in basketball and as in football, as in track and field, which Tennessee State has been famous for track and field for nearly a century. The NHL is not going to say this is not a good idea. The Nashville Predators are not going to say we're against this. It's not like there'll be competition for the entertainment dollar in Nashville. So the Predators are in with practice facility. I don't want to say they're in for used elbow pads, but it might come to that too. The NHL, as far as I know, hasn't thrown any money at this, and it would be unseemly if they did, because then a school and the other college could say, where's our money? So who is spearheading it really at this point is two guys. One of them is a guy named Nick Guerrero, who's the assistant coach and sort of PR and outreach director, and he's from a few blocks away from where I grew up in Brooklyn. And he's not African-American, if that matters. And then they've hired a man named Duante Abercrombie, who grew up in Washington, D.C., who played youth hockey in a program established in Washington, and who was hired as the coach more than a year after they made the announcement that they're going to have a team.
We'll be right back. What has Abercrombie had to say about the work involved?
He is an extraordinarily passionate and persuasive man. He knows the game. He's coached at many levels. He was an assistant with the Leafs, tending largely to the healthy scratches and to the Marlies, the minor league team, but certainly has been in the NHL dressing rooms. He knows the game. He's coached on the ice. And it was made clear to him and to this fellow Nick that any scouting, any recruiting, any traveling, off you go, guys. Enjoy the trip. And they're doing it on their own dime, as far as I know. And I heard from Duante about driving up to Pittsburgh to a tournament and sleeping on a friend's floor. And when he's been going back and forth to Nashville, he lives here in Washington or in a nearby city of Frederick, Maryland, scouts the junior leagues. These are the U.S. junior leagues, which are not at the level of the CHL. It's been a separate, as an aside, the CHL players have not been accepted as amateurs in the NCAA U.S. Division I colleges. So you could not go from a Memorial Cup winning team and then play at Cornell or Michigan State or Minnesota. That rule was waived just a few months ago, as far as I know. And so the true, quote, amateurs, the thousands of young men who, from the U.S. and Canada, who are playing in the Alberta Junior League and the U.S. Hockey League and the North American Hockey League, with dozens and dozens of franchises from Fairbanks to Florida, These were the young men who were now populating Division I university teams. They're now going to be competing for places on these teams against players who are on the top major junior clubs in Canada. So the landscape's changing every few minutes. NCAA now permits outright cash payments to athletes. I read that the University of Michigan alumni have raised $14 million to pay their quarterback, a new quarterback for the next 2 seasons. So there is a lot of money involved. There's not a lot of money in college hockey yet, but there could be. I know where my daughter is at Michigan State. They have 6 NHL first-round draft choices on the team right now. So can Tennessee State compete at that level with that kind of money? There's no evidence that they can. They have Coach Abercrombie. He is very enthusiastic. He is traveling all over the continent, but he does most of his scouting by video in the middle of the night. He doesn't have an Amex card to go flying wherever he wants. Doesn't have elite status at intercontinental hotels, as far as I know. He's working very, very, very hard. He has persuaded, convinced, tempted, at my last knowledge, 17 young men to join him on this odyssey. But that doesn't mean that they're all going to show up. It doesn't mean that they're all going to get the scholarship funding that they may believe they are going to get. That's not determined yet either. And they're very cautious, Duante and Nick, in saying these players have verbally committed. And that can change.
So when we talk about these players that have verbally committed, are they predominantly Black? Is that the makeup of the team? Are they American, or is there a mix of Canadian, American, Black, and white players on this club?
Well, I would say that universally they are junior hockey players, but not playing in what used to be called major junior in Canada. They're not CHL players. They're playing for teams like the Maine Nordiques and the Maryland Black Bears and the Amarillo, the Colorado Grit. They're playing in Salmon Arm. They're playing in Steinbach. They are 19, 20, 21-year-olds who are following the current pattern, which is you get to the NHL from Division I college. You get to Division I college after 3 or 4 years of a form of pay for play or semi-pro junior hockey. And you leave home at 14 and you start that journey. Speaking of this young man who my daughter knows, he's from Iowa. His father was a high school hockey coach. He went to a prep school in Massachusetts for a year or two, played for the Cranbrook Bucks of the BCHL for a year, played for Johnstown, Pennsylvania in the U.S. Hockey League for a year, played at Sioux Falls, South Dakota in the U.S. Hockey League for a year, played for the Dubuque Fighting Saints of the USHL for a year, and then it was recruited by Brown. So the players whom Coach Abercrombie is recruiting have had similar journeys. They've gone from one young man who is Afro-Canadian. His father said they're 11th generation Black Canadian. Went from Edmonton. He's from Edmonton. He's now playing in Lewiston, Maine for the Maine Nordiques. He's committed to TSU. There's a kid from BC who's playing in Alaska. They're all over the continent in leagues that are way under the radar, that are not Memorial Cup caliber junior teams, but these are the young men who are populating Division I college hockey in the States. So Duante Abercrombie has gone out there and tried to grab his share, selling them on being first, selling them on the spirit of the campus, selling them on, hey, we're Division I, just like Boston College and just like the defending NCAA champion Denver Pioneers, where, hey, we're going to be Division I too. And you're going to be seen. This is going to be a stepping stone. So he's sold them. At last count, as far as I could tell, I think there were 4 players of African descent among the 17 on the roster. That matters. It may matter less than you think it does at this point. No one whom I spoke to on campus at TSU said, hey, why are we having white players represent us?
Yeah.
I think there is a realization on both the university's part, the coach's part, and the fans' part that, first of all, having an all-black roster would be, I guess, in a way, gimmicky. It would also probably not be possible at this point. Are there 25, 30, are there 50 young black men playing in all those junior leagues? Probably. But that doesn't mean that all of them want to go to TSU.
Yeah, they'd want to watch out for their own prospects and find a program that they feel is the right fit for them. And
At the moment,
TSU may not be the best fit.
No, but 10 years from now, it may be a magnet. When I was in Halifax a few weeks ago, and I talked to some of the men who organized the commemorative annual game of what was called the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, that lasted from 1895 to 1930. They said, what a beacon this could be. And these were young men who had no opportunities, who were discriminated against at every level, men now in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. This was the generation that was called, where the fans would chant monkey when they came on the ice.
Yeah.
What a beacon they said this would be if it succeeds. I'm sure that the NHL and the Predators and the TSU administration all would love to be a powerhouse of HBCU hockey. Maybe, but not the only one specifically. But maybe there'll be a time when Morgan State or Grambling or Southern University in Baton Rouge, maybe they'll all have hockey teams. If you go backward and you ask yourself, why don't they have hockey teams? Why does Minnesota State have a hockey team, and Penn State, and Ohio State, and Michigan State, and the University of Massachusetts, and a lot of other publicly funded schools? Why do they all have hockey teams? And why do black colleges not have hockey teams? Then you have to ask the question, why aren't there more blacks playing hockey? And that is an economic question, and it's also a political question.
What hurdles does Abercrombie see in getting this off the ground? I mean, aside from getting people to actually commit or to sign as opposed to a verbal commitment, and aside from the money issues, what does Abercrombie see as being some of the challenges?
Well, there was talk at first that they would begin with what's called a club team. And a club team exists in the biggest universities of all. My daughter's on the tennis club at Michigan State, and they play against Ohio State and Notre Dame and all that. But they're not varsity, they're not on scholarships. They pay their own way. They buy their own equipment, pay for their own ice time, etc. So at first I thought, well, this would be cool. Well, a black school has a club hockey team. And they would play against other clubs. But somewhere along the line, it may be that Abercrombie himself said, why are we taking this half measure? Let's go right to Division I.
And lastly, as far as this goes, I mean, you can't have a team without players. What are the players saying about this possibility, about this experience?
Well, I haven't talked to all the players. The players I talked to, this young man, Wangus from Edmonton, who is of African descent, was beyond excited to be part of this, and with great enthusiasm that this is something, what a beacon this would be if he succeeds. Imagine what he could become. That doesn't mean that he's going to be an NHL draft choice. It doesn't mean that the guys who've been recruited can skate with Denver and Boston College and Western Michigan and schools like that at the start. They may be thoroughly outclassed. But it's exciting to be the first class at a university playing a sport. One young man, he said to me, I've always been a minority in hockey anyway. I'm Jewish, white kid from Long Island. He said, it's about being first. It's about establishing the culture of a team. So in that way, they're excited. These are young men who have been around the continent from Alaska to Florida, from Maine to California, with that dream of getting to a Division I school. I'm not sure they necessarily think that they're going to be first-round NHL draft choices, but to play Division I hockey, to get an education, and in most part to get an education for free at a good U.S. school, that's a pretty worthwhile dream. And they have spent hundreds of thousands of their parents' dollars. They have traveled hundreds of thousands of bus miles. They've been away from home since they were 14 or 15. And I think Tennessee State, if it turns out to be able to put a team on the ice that plays against Division I schools, it plays against Minnesota and Michigan and Ohio State and Denver and schools like that, that's a pretty big step. That would be pretty great for these young men. I don't think they're aiming any higher, but I think that's a pretty high aim, even if the team is not especially successful at the start. And certainly even if the team is not all African-American at the start, which it's not going to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, someone has to lay the groundwork somewhere, and it's interesting to see this program crop up like this and perhaps see the potential for future generations of hockey players. Allen, thank you very much for your time.
Happy to speak with you.
10-3 is produced by Sean Knox, theme music by Bryce Hall. Thanks to my guest, Allen Abel. You can read his whole feature at nationalpost.com. I'm Dave Breakenridge. Thanks for listening.